Hello, y'all. It is your host for this episode, Kodey Stoffer here, and we are continuing our coverage, our previews, our season previews of women's college flag football here. I got a couple of new programs here, as well as a returner slash just an established program, I guess one could say, heading into next season. So let's go ahead and jump into it. When we do these previews, we're going to talk about some of their players that we were able to see, their coach's background, and look at their schedule and whatnot, and just see what they're going to be made of as we look through all the levels of flag football on the collegiate level and get a clear picture on these athletes as we continue to head forward. And so with that being said, the very first team that we're going to talk about today is Illinois Wesleyan here. This is the home of the Titans here, and it's a very exciting team to talk about. They're a team that, when you look at this roster, definitely kept a handful of stuff local as far as just getting athletes from the Illinois area in Chicago and just a handful of other places, as I think that this roster is 100% outside of one player, it looks like, is from Illinois. But before I get too far into the roster here, I'm going to take a second to talk about their coach, Melissa Valenzuela. I want to say is how you say that here. And this is a coach who's been around here, especially in the realm of female/women's flag football and football in general. She has experience through all of those levels here. And, something that jumped out to me when I looked at kind of her bio basically is, she was a USA Select Bowl coach. So, she's worked with a plethora of athletes on that stage as far as what those athletes are looking to do with an international presence and whatnot. So you have that. She also coached high school flag football at Riverdale. She was also the wide receiver and defensive backs coach with the Oregon Ravens of the Women's National Football Conference. She has coached a bunch of different levels here over the years. She also played some football back in the day as well. She got her start as a player in a contact flag football league as well as other co-ed teams. So, she has plenty of experience here. I really like who's in charge of this program. Looking through this roster, there are a couple of names that we were able to find some film on, some players that we were able to find some stats on here. And some of those names that popped out included the likes of Simone Dyer here. She had 38 tackles and a handful of picks over a couple of years of play. I also had a chance to look at the stats of Natalia Stallings, I believe is how you say that. And if I say any of these names wrong, feel free to reach out to us over direct message, Instagram, Twitter/X, Facebook. Just let us know as we continue and hopefully talk about these names and more heading into the season here. But anyways, Natalia Stallings here, 31 receptions for 481 yards and 10 touchdowns here, as well as notching 46 tackles and some interceptions throughout that high school career. There's also Leah Glover, who had some passing stats, but mainly it was her athleticism, rushing for 973 yards and 6 touchdowns, while also catching 23 touchdowns and 1,800 plus yards, while also notching 63 tackles and 14 interceptions over her high school career here. Lots of touches, lots of yards, lots of big play potential, as well as finding the end zone quite a bit with 36 total career touchdowns for Glover. And then an athlete that we saw some film on, or that I saw some film on, was Lily Greenfield here. She's a very fast player who can just run out, get flagpoles, and win to the edge with her speed, she can run right past people trying to pull her flags. Her receiver film is not maybe the crispest kind of routes, but she's so dangerous with the ball in her hands that you just got to get creative, get her the ball, get her some steam, and she's going to make plays. While her speed also makes her a threat on special teams, which kind of opens up another facet of the game that could really translate super well to the college level that can punish undisciplined teams, and she's going to have a chance to shine in those regards. So there's a few athletes on this team, which is going to be interesting to see. We'll have to just find out kind of what the quarterback play looks like as we get into this season. But when you look at this roster, there are a couple of names with quarterback that pops out. You got Emma Kangilia, I want to say is how you say that. But you also have Diana Sarabia. Sorry if I am butchering these names here. But that's just a couple of names. Maylin Nunez also is in the mix. Aisha Smith. Now, Aisha, I did see that, she also recorded some appearances at receiver, it seems like, through some news articles that I read. So that's something that she could be used for as well. And she's also listed at defensive back. So, all of these quarterbacks here, they do have another position listed. Deanna is listed at running back. Emma's listed at defensive back. And when you look at this team, it's going to be figuring out what that answer is. Nunez is also listed as a defensive back here. But, I think that there's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of hype coming in to this first year for Illinois Wesleyan here. And, there's a lot of just, I think, talent that they're able to pull from other places. There is an interview with Kamani Glasper here, who's on the wrestling team. And so when you have wrestlers, that brings in a little bit of flag pulling, kind of experience in a way, not really in the flag pulling way, but as far as, translating those skills, shooting for the hips, getting those pulls, that is good talent that you want to bring in here. And Valenzuela looks super excited as far as the team composition. She's going to, give this team what they need and has led a bunch of different backgrounds and whatnot over the course of her experience. So it's going to be exciting to see how this team does. But there is a schedule for this squad here. And they're going to open up their season in a Chicago Bears tournament. Not exactly sure who or what is going to be in that tournament, but that's going to be March 7th and 8th that kicks off their season. Now, it's important to note that Illinois Wesleyan is at least listed on the D3 level of competition. So it's very interesting to see that after they start off at North Park, which makes a lot of sense, I think, as far as playing another Chicago squad, they're going to be on the road against Milligan University as well as Cumberland University. They're going to go down to Tennessee, get a couple of games in here. And, Milligan was one of the most improved programs, and Witten was our coach of the year last year. So it's going to be interesting to see them go against a squad that's bringing back a handful of talent, showed a lot of growth last season, and what they can do against that caliber of team. But something that I think is going to ultimately sharpen them as they head back here and by here I mean Illinois, to Rockford for the Rockford Rumble, where they have Rockford to play, as well as Lindsey Wilson. Both of those games on March 20th being a Friday. Now, after that, they are at Marion, who is in Wisconsin, before finally getting some home games here. So keep that in mind. They start off the season with 6 road games before finally getting to play Illinois College at home, Benedictine College at home as well. They're going to then go to Aurora and St. Francis, both of those games on the road before playing Rockford, Marion, North Park, and Aurora all at home. So they're going to have a handful of similar opponents here. Now, there are going to be some challenges and some roadblocks here, especially in their first year here where they're just going to try and put one foot in front of the other. But this team is, I think, capable, at least as far as the athletes that they have, of winning a game. Now, it's going to come down to what opportunities they can get. But I have a lot of faith here in Melissa Valenzuela here. I like the team that she's put together. I like the experience that she has on paper here. And so I would not be surprised to see them win a handful of games and try and fight for a 500 year. Now, they are going to play some teams that do have experience here, and that's going to pose its challenges, as well as teams that just have talent as well that they've brought in themselves. And I think just a few less question marks. But this is a team that I really think, you look at this schedule here, not including the Chicago Bears tournament, just because I'm not sure who they're going to draw here. But out of their other 14 games here, it's really hard to see them not win 5 of these games, honestly, and try and avoid double-digit losses. Now, I'm not trying to put too high of expectations here, as there's going to be other teams here that we're going to learn more about as we continue to cover these previews. But I think that that's pretty attainable, and I think that they really can push for an 8-6, a 9-5 kind of season here, and then we'll see what happens in that Bears tournament. But, I just think that the coaching looks really good on paper. They have a bigger staff as well, which I think is also going to be super important. They have a roster that's big enough where they can compete with each other in practice, which doesn't sound like a big deal maybe, but you would be surprised at how often that struggle is prevalent in the college flag football scene. And, they have players with experience that I think is also important. So that's kind of my outlook and my take on the Illinois Wesleyan Titans here. Now, there's going to be plenty of more players that pop up, and we're going to have opportunities to talk about here. But for now, that's kind of my 2 cents on Illinois Wesleyan. Now, this next team could really make some noise, I think, on the college flag football level. This is another new program here, and this is Brewton-Parker Christian University here. This university is based out of the southern state of Georgia here. So, it's one of those teams that, participates in the Sun Conference, as one of them is out of Mount Vernon specifically here. And, they have a couple of different conferences depending on where you look. But this is an NAIA team, is the long story short here. And, this is a team that, looking through this roster and seeing some of the athletes that they're bringing in, this is a team that I think could be very interesting and potentially mess up some people's days heading forward. But anyways, the coach of this program is Sheldon Miller here. It was a little hard to find information on his experience, but it looks like he's been around the scene in football, track and field, and women's wrestling. He's been a director of recruiting as well, and I think that you can see kind of that come to life with some of the athletes that he was able to snag for this squad here. And, his background in football is that he played D-line back in the 90s for Statesboro, I believe. And so, Sheldon, looking forward to seeing what he's able to do with these athletes because, man, there are some very exciting ones that put up numbers, basically all of them from Georgia, which makes sense. That's their own backyard here. And watching some of the film, I think that this defense has a chance to be really special with just kind of the stable of pass rushers that he was able to bring in here. When I talk about this, I look at a Liana Gill here, who is one of the special athletes I was able to see. She is listed at running back, or at quarterback, my apologies here. And, she had a solid showing at quarterback as far as, the stats. She was able to put up over 2,400 yards, throw for close to 30 touchdowns on 67%, and completion. And her junior year, it's really her rushing capabilities that open up the game. 10 touchdowns and 1,600 yards. And those quick feet and that quick burst and good acceleration is what makes her a darn good quarterback and rusher. She's super nimble on her feet. She's dangerous at running. Her change of direction helps her keep up with other quarterbacks and lose opposing rushers. And, I think that she reminds me a little bit, at least of the beginning, of a Maya Karula in some ways, as far as just like that speed and kind of that run first tendencies. But she is 5'9" as well, is what she's listed at here. So a little bit taller and could potentially see the field a little bit differently. And is just a heck of a playmaker on both sides of the ball. I don't know if they're going to also use her at rusher, but she did record 34 sacks as a junior and overall had 69 sacks in her high school career. So when you have that kind of prowess, I think it's going to be hard to look away. But if you're going to invest in her as your quarterback, okay, and not utilize her on the defensive side of the ball, that's totally fine because you have a Makia Griffith who had 13 sacks and 4 picks as well as 66 tackles her senior year. You also have Sophia Souza here, 39 tackles, 22 sacks. Very fast first step, quick change of direction. Blew up the run game with good leverage and level, approaching ball carriers and blockers. Could honestly be one of the best and highest impact rushers in the freshman class in the country this year. She's beat double teams by going around. She's split blockers. She helps teammates get easy turnovers. And one of the best highlight reels that I've got to watch so far in my research is Sophia Souza here. And so you have some defensive prowess coming in on that side of the ball, at least at rushing. And then you have people in the defensive backfield who can force interceptions here or make plays on the ball. Kennedy Osborne had 5 picks and 47 tackles. You have Sky Reiner here, or Reiner, once again, sorry if I'm saying these names wrong, who had 7 interceptions as a senior here. You had another very versatile force here at linebacker / rusher here in Karen Cummings, once again in that front section. 104 tackles and 17 sacks while going through high school here. Also recording 2 picks, but I just wanted to bring up kind of that pass rush here a little bit first because it's going to be complementary with some of these other ball hawks that they brought in. I'm looking at Kaelin Singletary here, 21 interceptions at cornerback, making an all-state appearance here. You're going to have people that are going to get in the face of the quarterback here, and then you have a defensive secondary that's more than capable of making plays on the ball. Giselle Riley, 8 interceptions over a few years in that defensive backfield while also notching 176 tackles. So I think that this defense has potential to be a very exciting defense to watch here. And then, this offense is going to be interesting because, like I said, you have Liani Jill here out of Florida. Okay, so you have that experience that it's good to bring in a quarterback out of that region, right? And is really fast. And then you have a couple of rushing threats from Georgia who picked up a ton of yards. I'm looking at Kalia Wesley, who's listed as having 3,200 yards in her high school career, listed as one of the best running backs in Georgia coming out, where they run the ball, I'd say, a little bit more than some other places here, right? So you have good athletes kind of out of the backfield where they can try and keep it simple here for their running back to start. You also have a Tamaria Williams here who had over 130 touches for over 1,000 yards and 16 touchdowns through rushing and receiving here. So you have some versatility in that way. Singletary also had 500 yards rushing in her senior season as well. And you take a look as well at Michaela Davis, who has some quarterback experience, over 1,500 yards passing with 20 touchdowns to 17 picks, but another 488 rushing yards and 9 rushing touchdowns here. So you have a lot of rushing threats. And then once you get passing in the air here, this is where things might be a little bit more unproven, in my opinion here, but you still have some looks. Like I said, Williams, Tamaria has receiving experience and touchdowns as well. Kennedy Osborne almost had 500 yards and 10 receiving touchdowns throughout her high school looks as well. You got Kinsley Jeremy, I want to say is how you say that, who had 10 receiving touchdowns. So, and then Sienna Johnson, who, when I watched her film here, has really good ball skills. She has a good release, and is a very capable high point attack as far as she attacks the ball aggressively. She puts her hands up there. She can get up vertically as well, which is always good to see. And, it's also interesting because she's listed at 5'3", so she's not one of the taller players on this roster here, but is just somebody that can give you those looks. Also at wide receiver, you have Zillaria Miller, who's 5'8". You also have a 5'9" potential target in Michaela Fudge here. So, this team, it has me very interested, in short. I know I kind of jumped all over the place as far as what they have going, but I think that this defense can lead to offense, and then with the athleticism on offense, they could take advantage of short fields and, string together potentially some wins for this program and get this program off to a better start than other programs have seen in the past. Now, they're not going to be without their share of struggles. Once again, they do play some experienced teams. They do play a Milligan. They play a Florida Gateway College. They play Warner, Weber, Daytona State, St. Thomas, Kaiser, a lot of these teams, Thomas, right? The Sun Conference, that's those teams that we're looking at. I don't know if they're necessarily built to compete with some of those teams right off the bat, but an Andrew College, an Emmanuel University, a LaGrange, some of these other teams here that it looks like they're hosting a tournament over a couple of days or over that Saturday on February 7th where their season starts off, they could get off to a winning record here out the gate. Now they then play Huntington, and then there's going to be a tough stretch. All those teams that I said, they play basically all of them in a row. I'm interested to see how they match up against Daytona State that is a solid community college program, as well as Weber. It's going to be interesting how they retool, and some other teams were able to play Weber kind of close, but I think experience is going to matter in a lot of these games. And so I look more to kind of the rear part of this Sun Conference schedule where they get Florida Memorial, Point University, Reinhardt University, and Life University. Splitting those games at home and on the road is what that spread looks like. And if they want to get conference wins, I think that it could come here against like a Florida Memorial, depending on who they were able to bring in or how this program is going to be ran. I look at maybe Point, considering that you get to play at home. Then they're on the road against Reinhardt, that has been a program that's faced its troubles and its inconsistencies, right? Life, on the other hand, I think is a program that should be trending in the right direction. And then Thomas, that's been a powerhouse for a bit, but it's going to look very different, right? Without Parmer, as well as a lot of those, that class of 25 that made that program so special in so many ways, right? But regardless, I think that this team can make plays. I think that they can string together highlights, and I think that they can win a few games here and maybe pull off. They're a team that could pull off upsets depending on how the defense is churning, what those turnovers look like, and how the adjusted game plan will go. I think it'll be very interesting to see Sheldon go against some of these more experienced coaches in the Sun Conference, and that's going to determine a lot of what happens here, at least in the flag football scene, experienced coaches, and what this team is able to accomplish heading into their season. And so that's kind of my thoughts here, but I'm very excited for this program here. I'm very excited to see what they're able to do, and if these athletes kind of pan out the way that I can see them panning out here at Brewton-Parker Christian University out of Mount Vernon, Georgia. And finally, we've been keeping it to about 3 programs per episode here, and anytime there's new programs, it's going to look a little different, right? But we're going to talk about a program here that's been around for a little bit here in Point University, the Skyhawks here, looking back at last season. Okay, not how they wanted the season to go, but there's some things to be happy about. There's programs that in their early years really aren't winning games. And, 6-10, you could do significantly worse. They were able to pull out, and force some close ones as well here. You look at their season, they started off with a close, brutal 12-7 loss versus Milligan here. Now, obviously, this team, that Milligan team, is one of the most improved programs in the country, and I think it's nothing to scoff at to go bar for bar with them early on. Now, they bounced back from that and got a win against Columbus State University 33-6, and they rode that into a little win streak here where they beat Emmanuel 27-0 as well as Alabama State 62-0. But then you look at some of their conference games here versus Thomas, a tough loss. Florida Gateway College, a tough loss here. A couple of tough losses actually against Florida Gateway. Life also got the better of them in a 26-0 win here. And from there, just kind of struggled in terms of, once again, that Sun Conference. Kaiser, St. Thomas, 39-12, Warner, 45-20. Now, they competed pretty well against Weber, losing only 20-6. I think that that's something that's not bad, especially with how much talent was coming back on that Weber team and just that experience at the quarterback position. But I think that the heartbreaker here is the Florida Memorial loss, 25-20. You rewrite a couple of these games, and you're looking at a potential 8-8 season where you break out to 500. So losing those close ones definitely stings just a little bit, as far as that game and that Milligan game. But they did pull out some close wins. They beat a Pasco 28-13, and I think more importantly, they beat a Reinhardt 6-0, and I think that should help as far as recruiting and trying to win that battle versus Reinhardt, and just trying to stand out and not be at the bottom of the standings in the Sun Conference here. And so, like I said, they went 6-10, 1-7 in that conference. Okay. And definitely looking ahead to next year, but you are going to be losing some pretty big players, or at least contributors from last year. I'm looking specifically at Matty Motts, who had 5 receiving touchdowns, 350 receiving yards on 37 receptions. Just a big play athlete here that you're going to have to replace that production with. It doesn't look like Tiziana Poole is coming back either when I look at this roster for this season. So that's something to keep in mind as far as just production that they're going to have to replace. And finally, Christian Wright here at the quarterback position where, wasn't maybe the most effective. And, they still are bringing back a quarterback, which is important. But you just lose a little bit of that competition of, that dual threat that Wright was more so than Correa was. As far as, rushing for 147 and passing for 178. But you do bring back Correa Williams here, just a little bit more efficient as far as completion percentage, was almost 20% higher, threw for 666 yards and 5 touchdowns to 7 picks. So that is a better ratio than the 7-12 that Wright was doing. And so hopefully you can continue to develop with Williams as well as that rapport with some receivers. I look at Leah Prather, who notched 138 receiving yards on 26 receptions. Kenzie Fillion, who had 183 receiving yards on 51 receptions. So those are some good talents to bring back. And then defensively, Chinera Shaheed as well as Claudia Taylor, they combined for 56 tackles and 11 sacks, with Shaheed notching 9 of those. So you have a pass rush that can continue to build off of and get some reps on. And then Fillion had a great year in pass defense here, 7 interceptions and 5 pass breakups. And bring back just some of these key players and key spots, I think is really important as far as secondary play, rusher play, and obviously quarterback play. That's the number one thing that you want to develop and the most important position in flag, and even more so, I'd say, than tackle, because the entire offense really is just ran through that quarterback. So very important to get that coming in. They're bringing in a few new faces here. Their freshman class includes a Zakiria Williams, Alexandria Jackson, and a NAIA Wesley here. But they also bring in Dania Smith from Pratt Community College. So somebody who's been in the flag football scene a little bit, okay? Didn't get to record the most eye-popping numbers, but you bring in experience, which I think is important for this program that, has a lot of players that is going to be seeing the field more so, not necessarily for the first time, but seeing it at a significant clip for the first time, that I think is more important to distinguish here. And so looking ahead to points schedule for 2026, they open up against Andrew College and Daytona State on February 13th. Now, I would like to think that maybe they could sneak out here with a 1-1 record. Daytona State, I think, is a team that does have a handful of talent, and one that, despite their showing in that JUCO championship, is one that's better than it looks. It just shows what a powerhouse Florida Gateway College is, which they do play a little bit later in early March after being on the road against Reinhardt and playing at home versus LaGrange College. They then play at Huntington. This game was scheduled for last year but was canceled, so we'll see if that sticks through, as well as another game against Alabama State before getting into action against Warner and Weber on March 14th. Those schools, they share a body of water between them, so they're just going to sail right across and play both of those squads. They'll then be at home versus Florida Memorial and St. Thomas and Kaiser all in a row, 19th, 20th, and 21st, before being on the road against Brewton, who I just talked about in that last segment. Heading into April, they got Life, Kennesaw State, and Thomas, Florida Gateway College, and they still have another day set aside. Now, I think something important to keep in mind as well is that there is a new coach in Shakalong. I'm sorry, Coach Long, for potentially butchering that here, but he has experience through the high school and club level. And, I think that this is a program that was in need of a little bit of a pivot as far as some accounts that we heard as far as culture and whatnot. And Coach Long here can bring in a culture of hard work as well as just like accountability and building each other up is kind of what it looks like he's aiming to do. He's got the team going on nature hikes and whatnot together to build up that, that camaraderie here and just try and build up the team as well here. So, he's seen his fair share cut out for him here. And I think that, maybe this is the pivot that Point needs to actually get trending in the right direction. Now, this is a program that does need to eventually establish that stability at the head coaching position. And hopefully Coach Long is the guy for that. And it seems to be resonating with the players so far. Now, that's only being told through social media, of course. So, I can't verify whether that is accurate or not. But it is something that looks active, it looks engaging, and it looks like an investment too, which is very important for these girls, these athletes here, these women, these athletes here, to establish a program here and build off of something here. It's good that he was able to keep a handful of returners who did see somewhat significant snaps last year, and to hopefully be able to build off of that heading into the future here for Point. Now, this episode went a little bit faster than maybe you're accustomed to, but that's because we're only doing 3 programs at a time right now as we continue to find out information. We're going to continue to put information forward here for what to expect out of these teams heading into next season as we continue to get rosters and schedules and stuff posted. So if you are a fan of a team, go ahead and pester them just a little bit for us to get information posted, get that stuff uploaded here, so that way we can get on the case here and establish what those teams are going to look like heading into next season. That being said, we do have a handful of preview episodes already completed here from Coach V as well as Gino. So go ahead and check those out anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon, and all the works there. Be sure that no matter where you listen to us on podcasts, that you turn on notifications here and you hit subscribe or follow on all of those. And while you're following, go ahead and follow us on social media, whether that's at Playmakers Corner on Instagram, at Playmaker Corner on Twitter/X. We are Playmakers Corner on Facebook as well, where all of these episodes are going to have little graphics as well as just information that we see as it comes. Especially Instagram is probably the big hub for women's flag football, girls flag football on the high school level. So we're going to continue to reshare anything that we do see as it pertains to news, highlights, and the works on all of those social media platforms. I have been your host for this episode, just a day after Christmas, so happy holidays to everyone who celebrated that, as well as the other holidays around this time of the year. And in case I don't hear from you or you don't hear from me, Happy New Year as well. Happy 2025. Thank you so much for a supportive one, and we will see plenty of y'all, and y'all will see plenty of us in 2026. Peace.